Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Optimal Metabolism Podcast. I am coming to you from outside, so I hope you don't mind a few sounds of nature here and there that you might pick up in the background, or should say, I might pick up in the background. But being in Wisconsin, I am really just diving into the circadian and grounding and all of the things that have helped me profusely to heal, which I am going to talk more about today. I figure why not? I don't have this luxury all the time. So I'm going to take advantage of it while I can. So I've been working outside as much as as possible. If it's real hot, which it is today, it's 88 degrees right now. I'm sitting in the shade and have my feet on the ground. And I know not everybody has that luxury, but I'm going to do it as much as I can because it'll be a blink of an eye and I'll be dealing with a foot of snow. So we are now more than halfway through 2024. And if you follow me closely, you know that 2024 has been a really crazy, crazy year for me. Probably the most challenging of my life for various reasons I'll get into in just a minute. But I just wanted to reflect. I was going to take this entire month off of releasing new podcasts, but I thought, I just want to update on what I've seen, what's been going on the first 6 months, the first half of 2024. I look back and so much has happened in my life. I can't even believe we're more we're we're more than halfway through the year. So it's been very challenging, but there's also been some silver linings, most recently just in the last month or two, which I want to talk about a little bit today. And I know I do some solo episodes here and there, but I don't talk a whole lot about my personal life and what's going on with me and things that I'm implementing. I talk here and there on the podcast, but sometimes it's nice to just reflect and for you to know me more as a person, like a whole person, right? Not just this lady who talks all about metabolic health and has guests on her podcast. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on. So just a really quick recap. If you're a new listener, if you haven't listened to all of the more recent podcast episodes that I've done, it's been a very crazy year for me in my personal life. I've had to take a step back from some things um, in my business and really just tend to things that I've never been faced with before. My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer a year ago in July. It was actually July 23rd. What is it today? It's a little bit before that I'm recording this, but um yeah, it's been a year since her diagnosis, and she pretty immediately started chemo treatments, did them all fall. They did not go well, as you can, kind of draw your conclusions from that, but they did not go well at all. And by January, she was in hospice and basically, not herself and barely talking. And she was in hospice for 30 days. So that was a very tough time for me. I was driving back and forth from my hometown to here. It's only about an hour. But I was just like rescheduling tons of things that I had on my calendar and going to be with her, staying overnight many nights. And just, watching her, slowly die for 30 days. So she was in hospice and she died February 23rd, which was one day before or the day before her 72nd birthday. So she was young, it's not like she was like this was all pretty shocking to us because it happened really quickly. And then I was faced with planning her memorial service, which was another month later. And in the thick of all of that, my dad started having more health issues. He's been kind of a health mess for about a decade and had a massive heart attack in 2019, and there was so much blockage in his arteries that he couldn't have surgery. They didn't think he'd make it through surgery. So he's just been pretty sick and ill since that time. And my mom's death just accelerated everything for him. And he started having some pretty severe health issues after her memorial. He was falling. He fell when he was with me one time, getting out of my car. He fell in the grocery store parking lot after getting groceries. And so my older sister and I are just like, I don't think dad can live on his own anymore. And then I had just lined up like Meals on Wheels for him and was gonna get him more help, like one of those emergency bracelets. And he ended up falling, getting dressed after taking a shower and laid on his bathroom floor for 20 hours because he could not push himself up to go to get to his phone. So in that time, he was just like he had lost so much strength and cardiovascular wise, he was a mess. So during that 20 hours, just laying supine, roughly cold, in shock, he had another heart attack. And anyway, make a long story short, he stayed 11 days in the hospital, where he got sicker. And I should probably do a whole nother podcast on that. He didn't go outside for 11 days. He ate terrible food. They told us in the hospital he was not a candidate for rehab and that we should basically sign him up for hospice and he might need a catheter for the rest of his life. Like they didn't even take him to the bathroom. I think they moved him to his recliner a couple times with his catheter in. But anyway, we basically begged, can he at least try rehab, which they agreed to. And then a month later, a month of rehab, he's, walking and able to live on well, we moved him to assisted living and he's not like completely we did not feel comfortable with him going back to his condo. But he was at least able to go to assisted living with minimal nursing care. So the whole experience in the hospital was terrible. And then, so my husband and I, we were the only ones who moved him. We and I'm taking all these days to like get him into assisted living, meetings, phone calls. It was just very quick because it's like my mom died. I didn't even really have time to mourn her death. And then all this stuff happened with my dad. So my husband and I moved him to assisted living and then we were faced with the enormous task of cleaning out his condo. He and my mom had lived in a retirement community, completely independent in their own condo. Um, and they were renting it, so at least I don't have to like sell a house or anything like that. But because he was renting it, he was paying rent there, he was paying rent in his new assisted living. And so I wanted to get him out as quickly as possible. So anyway, lots and lots of days have been spent over at the condo trying to get him out of there as quickly as possible. He's already at his new studio, but my husband and I have been over there multiple days. I've been over there by myself many, many days. My daughter's been awesome with helping. My sons have helped, and then we actually had to move my son across the state. He goes to college at UW La Crosse, which is way over on the western side of the state. We're on the eastern side. And so we loaded up the trailer one day at my dad's and moved him across the state and, just a lot going on. We also moved my mother-in-law to her house in May. And it's just been, one crazy thing after another. All my three kids are home for the summer, which I love, but it's just like lots of distractions, right? And, planning more food, planning more meals, that sort of thing. Not that they can't help with it, but they work. All three of my kids are of working age. So it's just been one of those summers. And this whole year has just been in like fast speed. And my husband and I have taken our trailer. We have a full size trailer. We've taken over to my dad's condo 3 times now. One to move my son, one to just like get rid of things. And then this last time we loaded up, I had taken my car full of donations 10 times up to the donation center 10 times. And then when my husband and I were there with our full size trailer, we completely loaded that up too. It's been crazy. And it's just been stressful and chaotic because I haven't had the bandwidth or the capacity or really wanting to sit down and go through every single box. So it's been like lots of split minute decision making of deciding what to do with their lifetime accumulation of things. So there's been some cool things that I've found, and, the process has been interesting, but it's been really, really fast as well. And like we've tried to have a vacation in there. We're trying to enjoy our summer. You get about 6 months of really nice weather in Wisconsin, and the other 6 months are usually not. I mean, it depends on if you love winter and snow, but we're trying to be outside and enjoy our summer as well. So we almost have him out of the condo. Um, the end is in sight. My daughter and her boyfriend went over on Sunday. My husband and I this last weekend just got out of town. Like we're just like my in-laws live in Door County, Wisconsin, which is one of the most beautiful places on earth for sure. And we go up there a lot, and we just are like, we're just going up for the weekend. I had spent all day Friday at my dad's, like we're getting out of here. And while we were gone, while I was sitting on a beach, my daughter and her boyfriend went over to my dad's condo and finished cleaning out the basement. There were still boxes down there in their back room, very dusty, very filthy. It's like yuck. Every time I was there, it was just dusty. Nobody had lived there for months and months. So it was just gross there. And anyway, they hauled up all the boxes, all the existing furniture that was in the basement, and I couldn't believe what they did for me. I was floored. So I actually cried after my daughter, like I got off the phone with my daughter because it's just one of the nicest things somebody has ever done for me. But that task is almost finished. But the I don't want to say like the most important, but one of the silver linings that I was talking about that happened is I've been working a lot on my circadian health and my cortisol regulation, because if you listen regularly, you know that I was having high morning blood sugars, and I'm like, what is going on? I eat low carb, I intermittent fast, I only eat twice a day. I probably eat less than 100 carbs on almost every day. I don't have insulin resistance anymore. I walk, many times a day. I strength train. I do all the things I tell you to do to improve your metabolic health and reverse insulin resistance. And so I'd been watching my morning blood sugars be high for many months, and I was kind of in denial about it. I was just dealing with so many things. But I put a CGM on again. I think it was April or May, maybe May. And I put it on for a company called Good Idea, and they're one of the sponsors of the podcast. And they have a sparkling water that does help to lower blood glucose. And I did some testing for them, and it, in fact, did lower my blood sugar by about 30% with this eating the same meal. But I was floored that my morning blood sugars were still not in line. And so I really the last 2 to 3 months. I mean, I started the circadian stuff in like March, April, like watching sunrises and that sort of thing, but I've really been consistent with it for now like a couple of months. I will say I haven't watched the sunrises as consistently over the last month or two because the sun comes up in Wisconsin right now between 5 and 5:30. And so many days I see the sunrise, but sometimes I just need my sleep and I need to rest a little bit more. So I'm very consistent with sunsets and getting out into the morning light. And I get out into the morning light as soon as I get up. That's the first light that I see, but I'm not always seeing the sunrise until it gets a little bit later again. But I wanted to talk to you about that because in the midst of this really crazy, chaotic time in my life where, I lost a parent, and my other parent is alien, and we've just had to do so much for him and my mom. And then one other thing that's caused me a ton of stress is one of my family members. has not been helpful at all. Not my immediate family, one of my sisters, and, has been vacant basically in the last 6 months, and, I'm just, like, wrestling with that. I'm trying to not let it bother me and just let it go and, focus on me, focus on my family, focus on my dad, focus on what needs to be done because that's in my family. Maybe I'll bring a guest on to talk about this. But in my family, there's three girls, and I've always been the one to like take the lead, take charge, like get things done, make phone calls. I was my mom's power of attorney. I'm in charge of their estate. Like that, it's just a lot on me. And my younger sister has not been present at all in the last 6 months. So that's something I've been wrestling with, trying to just let it go, forgive her for whatever, whatever is going on in her life, but it's still hurtful, um, that she hasn't participated in this whole process. So that's caused me a pretty good deal of stress as well. But anyway, during this time, my cortisol pattern had, and I've talked a little bit about this in another podcast episode, but my cortisol pattern had basically flatlined during the day. So when we look at cortisol, you want to look at it as a pattern throughout the day. Most of our hormones are rising and falling at different times. They're stimulated or started or a certain trigger will get them going. Well, you need protein, you need things to make them. But a lot of these hormones are light centered, meaning that's why circadian health is so, so important because these hormones need to pulse at certain times of the day, and what causes them to pulse and what causes them to be pulsing, rising, falling at the most, the appropriate times during the day for your best health is light. And so I was missing that in my efforts to balance my cortisol. So my cortisol pattern had flatlined. So basically you want your cortisol to rise in the morning, early morning, kind of peak midday, noonish time, midday, and then start to fall again late day and then be at its lowest point in the evening because cortisol wakes you up. It is, yes, it's a stress hormone. You would die without it, but it makes you alert. It makes you, you know, want to go out and conquer the world when during the day it gives you energy. But you don't want that at night, right? You want to go to sleep and rest and digest, or not digest, rejuvenate, reset. And so if your cortisol pattern is, kind of backward, maybe your cortisol is low in the morning, and then it peaks at night. That's not a good thing, right? Like you're not going to want to go to sleep and be rested when you should. Melatonin should be taking over in the evening after sunsets, and that's it's a hormone, but it's also a master antioxidant that helps you to rest and like your body to just heal, settle down, settle your nervous system, reset your hormones, and that is happening overnight. And so a lot of times people have high cortisol at night, and that's not good either. Or they have a really high cortisol patterns in the morning, and that can be problematic as well, like too high of cortisol, because then we're releasing glucose. So when you have high cortisol levels, you're releasing more glucose, and that can, increase our blood sugar, which can exacerbate our insulin resistance and all of the things. But I had a flatline pattern, meaning mine was low all day. And so what I've read and learned is that when you have a flatline cortisol pattern throughout the day, like I had, that's basically that's going from adrenal fatigue to adrenal exhaustion. And so that means that this has been going on for a really, really long time. And when we say adrenal fatigue, a lot of times people think, well, my adrenal gland's like tired. No, what happens is miscommunication along the HPA axis, where your brain is not communicating to your adrenal gland. It's not the adrenal gland's not working or it's not functioning or it's tired. It's just not getting those correct communication along the HPA axis. Okay. And so your brain's not telling the adrenal gland what time of day it is, what to do with the cortisol. And so you're basically your cortisol pattern flatlines like mine did. So I was shocked to see that. I kind of ignored it for a long time because I was working so hard on my insulin resistance and thinking that that was more important. Insulin resistance is really important. First 2 years of my podcast revolves around that. But I kind of was doing things backward. Like I was working on my insulin resistance without regulating my cortisol. Cortisol in the cascade of hormones, you kind of have pregnenolone as your kind of master hormone, and it kind of splits off into all of these other hormones. But cortisol is above insulin in the hormone cascade, meaning you can spin your wheels and fix insulin resistance, but you'll never keep that insulin resistance optimal and be at your best optimal health without regulating the cortisol melatonin pattern, which is circadian based. It's upstream from the insulin. So hopefully that makes sense. Go back and listen to that part again if you need to. But I brought my morning cortisol. Now I haven't tested my whole cortisol pattern because I had some blood testing done a few weeks ago on June 19th, actually, of 2024. And it was a blood test. So the morning cortisol test, I mean, you can test it in the blood, but I like to test with my students that I work with. I like to test it in the saliva because you can do it at 4 points during the day. So you take a morning one, you take a midday one, you take a late afternoon, you take an evening, so you can see what the whole pattern's doing. But I know that my main issue was my morning blood sugar, or my morning cortisol, sorry, not blood sugar. My morning cortisol was too low and flatlined. And so when I got my blood test back, and the other sponsor for today, the testing that I went through is called Cyfox Health, and it's a home testing kit, and it tests 17 major markers. And so they mailed me a kit. You can use my code for a percentage off, but I just did a quick blood spot at home and sent it in. So if you don't have a provider who will do all of these metrics, you can certainly use Cyfox Health, and there's a link in the show notes. But anyway, I got my morning cortisol back and it was normal. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, I knew things were happening. I knew my nervous system was starting to settle down because that's where I could feel it. That's where I could feel my adrenal issues, was my nervous system. Like I wasn't really having heart palpitations, but I could just like feel my heart racing sometimes. My left eye was twitching all the time. Whenever I would feel really stressed, my left eye would start twitching. Um, I would have to, implement some deep breathing to calm myself down. And I was just like really tense, like my shoulders and my neck were always tense. And I always attributed it to jaw clenching at night because I know I clenched my jaw at night, but I think the jaw clenching was because my nervous system was so, tense, and I was in a sympathetic zone all the time. And so that neck tension, that upper body tension is so much less now. And I feel like I recover from exercise and workouts more quickly. So those are the things that I've noticed. And my digestion has been a bit of a mess since college, honestly. I've had bloating issues for 20 some years. I've talked about this on the podcast, and there's been some major improvements, and intermittent fasting helped a lot because I wasn't eating all the time. Backing off on grains and carbohydrates and processed foods helped immensely, but I still will get some bloating every once in a while. And I learned that adrenal and cortisol issues just exacerbate this because it takes away from the digestive process. And so I've been doing some things for digestive health, to help support that as well. But my cortisol in the morning went from 2.8 to 12.6. And the normal range is 6.7 to 19.4 for that morning one. So this isn't for the evening. You want it lower in the evening, but for the morning cortisol, mine was 2.8. So way low, 6.7 to 19.4 being, optimal for the normal range. Mine went from 2.8 to 12.6. So I was able to do all of this during the most stressful time of my existence. And like I have said before, I always thought that, getting cortisol back into balance was mostly a stress. You just have to mitigate your stress and you have to, eat nutritionally sound so that you don't stress your body even more. And I tried that, and I'm like, I don't know what else I can do to mitigate my stress. And then 2024 happened, and I am just tickled that I was able to bring it back into balance during such a stressful time. So what did I do? I watched lots of sunrises. Like I talked about earlier, when, especially when they're not at 5 o'clock in the morning, watch lots of sunsets, because that the morning sunrise is what triggers your cortisol. And so if your cortisol is low, it's going to trigger an appropriate response for you. But also if it's really high, like my daughter has been dealing with really high morning cortisol, it helps to bring that down into balance too. So it's going to kind of, do whatever it needs to. It's either going to bring it up or lower it. So lots and lots of sunrises. I almost always walk while I'm watching a sunrise. um, and then the other thing I did was, I got rid of my sunglasses, and I noticed like my eyes aren't sensitive anymore to light like they used to be. That's another sign of adrenal fatigue and cortisol issues, is your eyes being really sensitive to the light, where mine used to be. I haven't used sunglasses in months. I do use them if I'm on the water in our boat every once in a while, but other than that, I haven't used them. um, I do a lot of grounding. So I sit outside and work. I'm sitting outside recording this podcast and just put my feet on the ground. Sometimes I lay on the ground. If I'm doing computer work, I'll lay on my stomach and do computer work in the shade if it's too hot. um Lots and lots of grounding. If you can't, get a surface, if you're at work and there's nowhere to ground, you can go out and touch a tree. Even anything that's rooted to the ground will help you with some grounding. But this gives you positive energy up through the feet. It sounds woo, I know, sounds crazy, but it really just helps. You're like a battery that needs recharging, and the grounding is what helps to recharge you. EMF exposure and, being in Wi-Fi all the time, that drains your battery. So the grounding kind of counteracts that. So lots of grounding, ditch my sunglasses. I went outside whenever I could during UVA rise. I've talked a little bit about this on the podcast, but download the circadian app. It's called Circadian app. And there's lots of different circadian, but if it's called Circadian app, and you will see when your sun rises, where your UVA rises, where your UVB rises, where your sunset is. You just plug in where you live and it'll tell you these things. It's free. And so UVA rise is really important to get out and try to get some sun exposure. I usually would aim for at least a half an hour. It's typically about 1 to 2 hours, 1 to 3 hours, somewhere in that range after sunrise. And so what happens during UVA rise is it triggers a lot of different hormones and processes in the body. Again, it's the light coming through the eyes, striking the skin, that's triggering these things. So if you are sitting inside and looking at the sun through glass, that's not the same. You got to get outside, at least open your window. But serotonin is also triggered by UVA rise, like that UVA time outside. And so why is that important? It helps with mood. You go outside during UVA rise, you immediately feel better. More and I don't want to say more importantly, but another important part of that is that serotonin can be stored, and it's later converted to melatonin later in the day as it gets dark outside, and that will help you sleep, that will help you recharge, it will help, with inflammation in the body. So the UVA rise is really important. So I try to take a morning walk during that time. If you can't, just even if you can go outside for 5 minutes during that time, that's a great time to get some activity or go outside. And then the UVB rise, again, you can get this on your app. That's when we make vitamin D. And my vitamin D levels have come up too. They're right about at like 50, which I want to get them higher. That was in June. I'm hoping by September, I get some really good vitamin D stores, because then as I go into winter in Wisconsin, I don't get that UVB for many months. So you got to store it up. I haven't had a sunburn all year. And so that UVA kind of primes your skin And the sunrise and the UVA primes your skin for what's coming later in the day, that more intense blue light midday. And that's when you make your vitamin D. Vitamin D is so important for so many things. I work outside whenever I can, like I said. One thing I'm still working on is mitigating EMF exposure. Just being outside will do that. But turning Wi-Fi off at night, again, I know these things sound crazy. Believe me, I get it. I just ordered like a phone sleeve from Bond Charge. They're another sponsor of the podcast. I have a 15% discount for you. You can look in the show notes. And I want to say before I forget, all of my products and codes are now in one place. My wonderful assistant, Keely, helped me with this project. It was a big project that we tried. It's like everything was so crazy for so long. We finally got it. There's a web page that you can now go to that all my products are there that I recommend and with all my codes. So it's fastaheal.info/products. So my website, I don't want to go off on a side tangent, but my website's being redone and all of it's all going to be different. It's going to be Shanna Wellness or ShannaHusandWellness.com rather than fastaheal.info. But you'll still be able to get there with the fastaheal.info/products as well. But that link is in the show notes. But anyway, from Bond Charge, I got a phone sleeve that I slide my phone in if it's in my purse, or if I'm driving in the car, and it mitigates EMF exposure and it helps you to not get hacked security wise. Like nobody can, get into your Wi-Fi or however, I don't even know how all that works, but if you're in a public place and you're on public Wi-Fi or whatever, nobody can like steal your information from your phone if you have this phone sleeve. And they're pretty inexpensive. I can't remember exactly the price, but I get them from Bond Charge. I order them for my family. Told my boys, I'm like, the worst place you can put your phone is in your pocket because all that EMF exposure right down there by your gonads. Like you don't want that. So I'm like, at least put it in the sleeve to protect you. And I wear a sling and I put it on my back and I don't like my phone sitting there. So anyway, I put my phone in the sleeve when I'm carrying my sling around. But I'm still working on mitigating EMF and things with that. That's probably the one thing my husband thinks I'm completely whacked with is the whole EMF thing. But I bring all of these ideas and, kind of these cutting edge things. And he always is like, what are you doing now? Like, are you kidding me now? Now you're turning off the Wi-Fi at night and all these crazy things. But then he learns, it's always a years of lag before the mainstream, people kind of catch on to it. And he's always like, "Oh, you were right." So I just let him, think I'm crazy for a while and then I'll he gets it later or he hears it from somebody else and then it's not so woo woo. But anyway, working outside, mitigating EMF. I changed our light bulbs out in our living room and our bedrooms. And I use Huga bulbs. Again, you can go to my products guide to see what my code is and the discount and everything. But they're red instead of blue and they're much more warm. And if we're going to put the lights on at night, I use those. And then of course I use blue light blocking glasses at night after sunset always. Like that's a no, that's non-negotiable. I even travel with them and take them to wherever we're staying. I don't care anymore. I used to think, oh gosh, what are people going to think with these crazy orange light glasses? But I don't care anymore. I just wear them after sunset. And then, I'm outside, so obviously I don't need them right now, but I do have daytime ones that are yellow lenses. And on my product recommendation sheet, there's a whole bunch of different companies that you can, all different points that you can look at blue light blocking glasses. But at night after sunset, you want the orange or the red tone. I do orange. Red tones more for people who really are sensitive to blue light, but orange are fine for me. And then if I'm inside working, I have to be inside on my computer. I use the yellow tone during the day if I'm on for, extended amounts of time. So that's another thing. Lots of nature walks. And another thing that I've done during my walks is I've stopped listening to podcasts so much. I listen to those more in my car when I'm traveling and driving. And just like listening to nature and letting myself, gratitude, pray. That's what I do during my walks now rather than trying to learn and just pack information into my brain all day, every day. Um, so that's been helpful. And then of course I've started to eat earlier and more of like a true breakfast time. So I'm usually eating anywhere from 7 to 9 at the latest. And that usually is only if like things just get pushed back because I can't sit down and make myself a meal, something's going on, I got to run kids or I have a meeting or what have you. Sometimes it gets pushed back, but usually I'm eating around 7. I don't always eat 3 meals a day. Sometimes it's just 2 and I'm fine with that. I just kind of play it by ear. I fast through dinner if I'm going to fast. It's just if I'm not hungry, I don't eat. And so that's worked really well for me. I haven't gained weight. I was really terrified of, oh gosh, now I'm going to start eating earlier and I'm going to have these longer eating windows. But, with all the circadian stuff, I'm bringing the cortisol back into balance and all of the hormones coming back into balance and me sleeping better because my melatonin is, in balance. I haven't seen the weight gain. So that has all been positive. So that's what I've done to mitigate my, very, very stressful 2024 so far. I do have a really big announcement coming in the next week or two. I don't want to spill the beans here on this episode quite yet because I'm working through some back end things, but it has to do with my courses and it's going to make people very, very happy. I'll leave it at that, but I have a big and I wanna make the announcement on all my platforms all at the same time, so but just know that that's coming in the next week or 2. I'm very excited about it. Um, I really feel like I'm just in a servant role right now at this point in my life and, serving God and serving my community, serving my followers. And I want my courses to be available to everybody. So there's some big, big changes coming that I'm really, really excited about. I'll be announcing those in the next week or 2. But I wanted to just kind of let you know what was going on behind the scenes. I know I have not been real present on social or even with podcasts, I haven't been doing as many interviews. Some of my content has been just a lot more about what's going on with my family and parents than anything metabolic or nutrition or any of that. So we'll be getting back to the normal stuff. It's just been a really, really, really crazy 6 months, 2024. So thanks for bearing with me. If you are liking these podcast episodes, I haven't been putting out as much content. So if you could share them with family members or leave me a rating and review, that's so critical for growth to the podcast. Even if you don't put out a episode for a week or 2, it's crazy how quickly your podcast can start to tank. So I've just needed to take a step back for a few weeks here, but if you can either share the episode with someone you love, um, leave a rating or review on any, Apple Podcasts is really the most helpful to leave a rating and review, but any, platform that you're listening on, I would so appreciate it. You don't have to write a lot, just a sentence or 2, scroll down to where you see stars, leave a rating, leave a review. That's just would help me a ton. I'd appreciate it during this time that, things aren't really that normal for me. So with that, I will leave you with all of the things that I hope that you are also implementing. I am still working on cortisol calm as my course for adrenal health and getting that out as soon as I can. So hope you learned some things today and thanks always for following and being a part of my community.